Is there did you attach the agenda to any of the emails so I could just open it up in my other laptop?
I don't think so, but I'd be happy to shoot that over to you right now.
Do that right now. I'm having a hard time getting into Board Docs, which I never have had a difficult time before. Doesn't make any sense. I'm blaming it on John's beard.
Thank you.
I am going to guess that Polly will forgive us if we start without her. So why don't we call the meeting to order and begin with the Pledge of Allegiance as we would customarily do so. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation,
God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Nice to see you all. Hope everybody is well. Hope we end the meeting and everyone is still well. My thought is that perhaps we'll see how far we can make it, but if it gets to be 7 o'clock, I will have to be making dinner for my kids. So maybe we could start to wind it up at that point.
Okay.
In terms of ticking these off, going down, 3.1 standards for student behavior. Mrs. Whip, I looked through it. I think that, I mean, to my mind, the two of them are fantastic. And I commend you for the work that you put into them. Would you like to explain? Are there any thoughts? Is this something, John, you want to run by? I know at different points you had weighed in terms of
if you can send us the draft, we'll go through it.
Yes, and that's
it's on the screen here now.
Right, but how long is it?
It's 8 pages, but can I just explain what I'd like to do is explain how we got to where we got to.
Yeah.
And then I think I would like John, I do think we need legal look at it because it is what, there was a standards of behavior for elementary school and standards of behavior for middle school. What I did was weave it into one policy of standards of behavior, student behavior for the whole school. We have been working as a staff on restorative practices this year, and we did work with the Youth Restoration Project on putting together a code of conduct that embraces restorative practices. So that is what is explained in the preamble at the beginning. And then it goes into consequences for behavior. One of the things that is still a work in progress is just tying up the behaviors and consequences, just making sure that they're all listed, cross-referencing between the two policies and figuring out from John what, from a legal perspective, needs to be in the document. So I guess I'd like to take any questions you may have, and I'm open to this policy needing a little bit of revision, but I think it's a good starting point, much better than we were at last year.
Again, we need to have this up in some form so that we can have the student handbook approved at the August meeting, which will allow us to have the student handbook in place for the opening of school. So the hope is that we could at least get these elements on for a first read for June's meeting so that we can have them on for a second read in July, which would enable that timeline.
Correct.
I think that's perfectly reasonable. Yeah. And if you just will email us, Sonia, a copy of it, Sean is the policy expert and he will take a look at it.
Okay, terrific. I would appreciate that.
And John did weigh in on the listing of infractions, so thank you for that, Attorney Anderson.
Okay, thank you.
And the big difference is that we've woven in some working through restorative practices and trying to resolve conflict before it gets to the point where some more of the major consequences might be necessary. It's not that they're not there, it's just kind of spelling out what the process is and how we work through it at a school-based level. I mean, if you get into a fight and you hurt somebody, you know, then you're still going to get in trouble for that. But it just is figuring out how to work through conflict from the perspective of making sure that we teach kids what they need to do as opposed to just infraction and punishment. So I think it's a pretty comprehensive policy at this point. We did work with Julia Steiny to go through it one last time on Monday, which is why I'm getting it this morning. So I apologize for that, but she did go through it with us and said she thought it was ready to send over to the policy committee and for a legal lens.
Looking through it, Sonia, the only question that I have off the top of my head is is in terms of general notations 3, which reads consequences may be adjusted in consultation with the superintendent. And I wonder if that is creating what is kind of the sort of informal. I realize that in number 4 afterward, the appeals related to this policy, it specifies that. But my understanding from you, Laurie, and you, Sonia, is that oftentimes these matters, there's a runaround that's sought by going right to the superintendent and skipping over a chain of command that you want to preserve.
Absolutely.
And so I didn't know if this opens the door to, because it doesn't specify who might adjust them, who can consult with the superintendent. I don't know what your intentions would be, but it might be something where if you didn't intend for everyone to consult with the superintendent, you specify it.
I'm going to, that's up to the fact that the general notations were carried over from the last policy.
Right.
So I have absolutely no objection to being struck altogether. And I was hesitant to take anything of the general notations out because I was suspicious that some of them were there because they needed to be for a legal reason.
Okay. I don't, it is, to my mind, a matter of procedure for administration. So it's whatever administration's preference would be, but that's the only thing that I wondered about.
Well, the principal in every building, in a case where this is a severe offense that it references, in the case of a severe offense, whether it's harassment, bullying, physical aggression, contraband, I think it's just as a matter of course, principals pick up that phone and contact the superintendent.
You're my first call.
And that is absolutely fine.
It works for me. If it works for you. Any other items that anyone would like to bring up, at least at this point?
Ed, can I ask a question?
Please.
Just about logistics. Sonia, are you intending that this replaces the standards for student behavior, both elementary and middle?
Correct. What I would see is those policies would be, this would supersede those 2 policies.
Okay, in that case,
this would be a new policy.
All right, and then, so that means we would be retiring those 2 policies. John or Sean, does that require school committee action to retire policies?
The way I see these titled, at least on the agenda, Carolyn, is standards for student behavior. So
right.
Probably this is merely us just changing the standards for student behavior. Same policy, different language.
If you're simply editing a policy, the edits that you'll make and then that are approved by the school committee, that is the new policy. If it's simply that you no longer wish to follow a particular policy and there's nothing that's replacing it, then a affirmative vote to say this no longer is a policy would be appropriate.
If I may,
Please.
It's kind of a cross between the two. What ended up happening is that it's not a clear-cut edit of either one policy. It's kind of a merging of the two. Because the language was not the same in both of those policies, so I'm not exactly sure where that leaves us.
My understanding, at least from the agenda, however, is that we are keeping two separate policies. One, standards for student behavior elementary, the other, standards for student behavior middle school. Is that?
Nope, those are the two existing policies. The new draft that you were given includes both. It's just called student behavior, standards for student behavior. So it would be one policy for K to 8.
Okay, I don't. In which case then, John, Sean, do we need to expunge the two present policies and create a new policy?
No, I think the action of taking whatever policies you're consolidating and approving a new policy is the action that the school committee would need to take. I don't think you need to have additional votes to affirmatively remove a policy, since these are just consolidations.
Okay, sounds good to me. Polly, welcome. We are in the standards for student behavior. I don't know if you have any thoughts that you would like to add. Need to unmute.
So what I heard was that we're taking the elementary and the middle school policy and we're merging them into this one standards for student behavior. Is that correct so far? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, I'm good.
It's appropriate now that we have a whole new framework rather than just punitive based on the age level.
Yep.
If everybody is in agreement, then could we put this on the agenda for a first read at the regular meeting then, please, Mariah? Moving down, since 3.1 and 3.2 have now been fused. 3.3, the violence and substance abuse policy for students. I don't know if that can be put up on the screen. If you, Sean and or John, have seen that. I mean, it's a similar kind of time frame need. So I guess, would you want Mariah to email you a copy of this as well? Or?
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
Okay.
May I add for just a moment?
Sure. This one's actually distinct.
I don't think it's
think-
been tweaked. Yeah.
Yep, this is what we currently have. This is not a draft. The reason it was put on was because at the last policy subcommittee meeting, it was discussed that this policy also might want to be merged in, just like those last two policies were, into the standards for student behavior, because it also needed to be aligned with restorative practices.
Here's Sonia, question. When you did the standards of conduct, did you look at this policy at all?
The violence and substance abuse, no, I did not.
This is for staff, right?
Well, it's in section 6. It's in section 6000.
Section.
So here's what my suggestion is, so that we keep the process moving. Sonia, if you could look at this policy, make sure that it is consistent with and or woven into the policy you just adopted, or we just reviewed, will be good. On the other hand, if they are two totally different things that need to stand independently, then let us know, and then Sean will look at either the woven together policy, or he'll look at them as two independent policies, and we'll report back. This does not need to be put on an agenda for the school committee yet, because this is your existing policy.
Will do.
Okay, may I just ask that if this does need to be woven together and incorporated in terms of keeping the timeline with where it is that we need to, that we are able to get it on to the next policy subcommittee meeting, which is, my understanding is just before the regular meeting, which would enable us to then put this on for a first read for that regular meeting and keep it going toward the student handbook timeline?
And that would be a week from tomorrow?
That's correct.
Yep, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know that there had been discussion, my recollection, Mariah, was that this actually was, and Polly, you mentioned it, was whether or not this was with respect to staff, students, whether or not we needed both, et cetera. Is that something that we want to take up, that discussion, something that we want to take up at this time?
I'm not sure. What's in, what do we have for, policy around staff and substance abuse? Do we currently have something?
Well, don't we have, we have a commensurate, I believe, policy. We have the drug-free workplace, let's see. Hold on.
We're required to have the drug-free workplace policy in it.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, policy, Polly, weren't you the one who said that we had two about violence and substance abuse, one for kids, one for adults, or?
So I thought we did. Was this one just in both places, Mariah? Do you remember?
That
Polly,
might,
if I
Yeah,
can, the other place that it was located in is under school committee. The violence. and
That's what it
substance
was.
abuse.
Okay, all right.
So it's not the adult piece,
Okay, all right.
because I think you thought that at one point. Yeah,
Okay, all right. That was,
okay.
okay, so yeah, it shouldn't be under school committee. It should be under students. And if there's a drug-free workplace,
We're good.
yeah.
I think so too.
In the new board docs numbering system, does it appear under students, Mariah, or does it still appear under?
I think it's under both.
It has been moved to just students, and I did
great.
today go through and redo all the numbering, so it is now not alphabetical, it is now by adoption date.
Okay.
So we're
Thanks.
great. It's good. So the policy's been removed from the secondary point of reference, and we're going to probably work to get it subsumed into the new framework for discipline. So the code of conduct. We're good. We're moving along.
Okay. So just as a quick recap, Mariah, if and Sonia, if we do need to do any work and incorporate this, we will get it on for the next policy meeting so that we can move it along. Moving down then to 3.4, the student handbook. I don't see a draft that's attached, but I'm
Okay.
not sure that that is a matter of policy and that the policy subcommittee has ever passed along I know we've discussed this in the past, but I'm not sure that we've ever passed along the handbook as a policy.
My understanding is that when it's in a complete form, that the school committee, I don't know, reviews it at a meeting. That's typically what you've done in the past.
Yep.
I
Right.
didn't try to give you a draft right now of what the handbook would look like, because one of the big parts is going to be the discipline, the student code of conduct, which is what we're working on. So it's a work in progress, but I think we're not far enough along in the process for me to give you a draft.
No worries. I think I was trying to suggest that it doesn't really fall under our purview anyway. It's not a matter of policy. It's a publication that the school department, that the school committee.
School committee. Yep.
If that would just need to be on for July
Correct.
in order to have it out for August. Okay. 3.5 then, moving down, the school improvement team criteria policy. See if I can find my printed copy. And this will, I did not
Thank you, Mariah.
grab at a draft. Oh, here, wait a minute. Let me find my, oh, here it is. My copy from Newport. Do we want to go through this line by line and come up with it, with a school improvement team policy at this point? Is that too onerous? I find these video meetings just incredibly laborious and not really conducive to any sort of collaboration on documents. But if we want to go through line by line and do it, I'm happy to do that. It's whatever your pleasure is. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, we could put it on to a future meeting and with a draft that we could look at, or we could do it now. What does anyone prefer?
Ed, is this the one from Newport?
That's the only sample that I've seen.
Right. Could you scroll down a bit for me, Mariah?
I thought I had provided you the sample from Charahoe.
I think that, Mariah, was it the case that the two were the same, and so you just kept the Newport one up? Is that what I recall?
Yeah, I mean, this is pretty much boilerplate. I remember sit teams in Massachusetts, spending over a decade there. This is pretty much boilerplate policy around the composition of the sit team, the duties of the sit team. This is the heart, the sit team is the heart and soul of ed reform.
Reading this plan, I had two questions. One was that this one calls for elections, both of parents by way of the PST
Right.
and of under the auspices of the school. So it has additional considerations for running elections. And I don't know if that's something that the school community wants to take on, if it's something that the PST wants to take on, or if there would be an alternate way of designating parents and students. And I know that Pat had indicated that he wants explicated in here that a member of the SIT team will also be a member of the IB implementation person for the IB program. Those are the only two things that came to mind when I was reading this.
I think elections are for larger districts, you know, when you could have literally hundreds of parents vying for a spot on the SIT team. Our PST is so small in scope, you know, relatively speaking. So I remember we discussed this Thursday night. There are pieces of this that we could tweak. The policy on whole is on point, definitely. But we could definitely localize this to reflect our smaller community. Bless you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Whip, any thoughts about having school-wide elections for students? Is this, I've heard at different points, discussion about having student council and that sort of thing. Is that something that,
I think it would certainly be appropriate to have a student representation from the 7th and 8th grade level.
Right, and you have to have them on. So I mean, those are the only two areas, Ed is right, that really are not sort of localized for our small one school school department. But
I mean, I guess I would suggest that we ask the PSC to appoint a member, and if they choose to have an election, that's on them, not us.
Right,
I think that's a very good way to do it.
absolutely.
I think my concern with having the PST appoint a member is that, I mean, perhaps there should be two parents in that case, but I would like to have the possibility for parental participation that isn't limited to just PST members. And my suspicion is that if the PST is going to appoint a member, they're going to pick from within, and they already have a voice and a presence at school committee meetings. And presumably the point of the SIT committee is to cast a net as broadly and widely as possible to incorporate as many different points of view as possible. So I don't have a problem if the PST does it, but my thought would be that if they do appoint people, that one of the appointments be from, outside of the PST membership.
We could.
I think the thing that I like the most about this policy is that it allows for the school committee to retroactively tweak the composition of the SIT committee if the school committee determines that it's not representative. So, but having said that, I think that it makes sense to have the policy itself try and have the SIT committee be as representative as possible. Try and make that have it composed of as many different points of view as we can. Holly, do you have any thoughts?
No, I agree. I find the PST to be very like-minded, so it would be nice to have parent representation from somewhere else as well. I agree with that.
Might I suggest we just remove the PST altogether and find a mechanism for appointing a parent that is fair, equitable, representative? You could have two parents.
Right, which one may be, one may not be, or they may
Right.
both be.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I think putting PST in there could be restrictive, like as Ed said.
I think having a PST member is perfectly appropriate from my perspective, but I would be hesitant to reduce parental participation to just the PST.
All right, so let's add some language that broadens the scope.
Okay, who would you suggest it would be? I mean, it would be Sonia, I take it, that would then appoint the parents?
An appropriate balance of parents, guardians. So we'll have to come up with a mechanism for the selection,
Does it have to be one beyond the principal appointing the parents?
Shall be appropriate balance of parents, guardians, professional personnel, content leaders. It's pretty prescriptive already. The ILT gets folded into that, the instructional leadership team, they are the content area coordinators. We want to add IB to this list.
Well, and the other thing, the other thing is I would consider the IB coordinator as part of the instructional leadership.
The
team.
ILT, absolutely.
So by
I do like,
nature of
yeah,
that,
I do like number 7 as Ed does. Should the school committee or the superintendent determine that there aren't ethnicities, races, socioeconomic sectors included, we could circle back and remediate. Some mechanism has to be spelled out for selecting the parents and the students. Otherwise, we want full transparency. So.
Yeah, I agree for Sonia's sake. You probably want something in writing, some kind of mechanism. You don't want to put her in the hot seat for picking.
Yeah.
I don't know if everyone see me, my air quotes, her favorite parent, or whatever it'll boil down to. You want something to get her out of that hot seat.
and
So
the
this-
other thing going through my mind is something that says that you will try to have parents from different levels. Like if I had 5 parents that want to be on the school improvement team, I wouldn't want all of them to be
Right.
middle school parents.
Right.
You'd want primary, elementary, upper elementary, and middle.
I mean, that would be, so I would be looking for parents from different levels that have different perspectives.
So 4 different levels,
Or just,
or 3.
or
Right.
just a variety of levels, so that you know, you can kind of, depending on who is willing. It has not been my experience that you get lots and lots of volunteers for this type of
No.
committee.
Mm.
You get some, but
Right.
So it just needs a couple of tweaks and it'll be ready to go, absolutely.
yep.
Laurie, you, to recap, primary, elementary, upper elementary, and middle?
Yeah, I mean, primary grades, well, that's like kind of pre-K through 1, and then there's,
I would do primary, intermediate, and middle.
that works.
Okay.
Yeah, that works. So 3,
Okay.
primary, elementary, and middle.
Elementary. And this should be by some sort of application pool on the part of the parents, or from which the principal picks, is that?
We could do something like a Google form out to everybody, and they submit their interest.
Right.
That would be relatively, that wouldn't be something so difficult for parents to do.
And then some sort of, I don't want to say vetting, but some sort of rationale, you know, what they could contribute.
Mhm.
And maybe
Okay.
a rubric for selection to make it fair and transparent.
Would it be in this Newport, the Newport policy, I'm not sure if you could scroll down to page 3, Mariah, has an application form.
Right.
And the application form for parent representative has parent name, address, phone. And the question is, please explain your reason for wanting to serve as the parent representative to the school improvement team and indicate the contribution you feel you would be able to make. Do you think that that is a sufficient?
If you have you have to have a rubric attached to it, or people will question your choice.
Okay, this does not.
We could clearly make one. Definitely.
Is that something that HR has a sample of, Carolyn? Or who is the easiest person to implement whatever the rubric would be?
I think Sonia and I could come up with something. We just do some
Yeah.
backwards design. We think of the ideal complement of the parent sector of the SIT, and we just sort of designed a rubric that
Okay.
would, yeah. So that way, Sonia's not accused of playing favorites or whatever. We have a somewhat scientific way, even though it's open-ended and qualitative. But they have to submit a rationale, and there's a rubric attached to it.
Okay. The rubric, I think then should be incorporated into the policy.
Yep.
Would it be possible for you guys to get some sort of a rubric to us? I don't know if it's the next meeting or the following one or whenever it is that we want to re-examine this one.
That's a very easy plane to land. Am I right, Sonia?
I think so too.
Yep.
Okay, that's really good. And we can, sorry, I'm going back looking for the terminology, and I'm not sure that it is in here. Are we going to prescribe the people who would be on the faculty members of whom the IB sort of liaison is, or would all of those faculty members be on the school improvement team? And can we, to address Pat's concern, be sure that we just make plain that the IB person is to be included as one of those?
Yeah, I mean, the language could be as simple as all 4 coach coordinators. And so ELA social studies is 1, science is 1, math is 1, and international baccalaureate. So we could delineate those very easily.
The only thing that I would ask, and I don't even know how I feel about this, but that really does put mostly middle school people. It doesn't really represent the primary or the lower grades. But I also, I mean, how many I guess I'm struggling with how many teachers do you want on the team?
Well,
I just wonder about the distribution.
Well, the Charahoe policy makes clear that teachers are going to be less than half of the team.
Right. So.
Why?
No, I said right. Yes. I mean, right. Correct.
I say, right.
In other districts and in Massachusetts too.
Team. So, I mean, we just have to have a sit of greater than 8 people.
Right.
But, you know, in terms of the IB person at the moment, I guess it would be skewed toward the middle school. But if IB is going to be phased in for all grades, I mean, moving forward, it would be the IB person would be more representative of the student population as a whole. So at the outset, I favor 1 grade. The other question, since we're talking about applications, is that it also, that the Newport's policy allows for business and community members selected by the principal. Is that something that we want to have applications for, or is that something, Sonia, I mean, do you want installation from all appointments that you would make by way of having applications and rubrics, or would you like the discretion just to be able to?
Can we get, I mean, the 3 community entities that I can think of off the top of my head that I would be looking at would probably be representative from CEF if they would be interested, maybe the community center and then the town. Those would be the 3 I would be picking up off the top of my head, though I certainly wouldn't object if a different organization came along and was interested.
And local businesses as well.
So maybe we do put out a similar application with rubric.
I don't think so.
No?
Yeah, I think maybe with the student representatives and the parent representatives, but I think you should be able to use your discernment when it comes to local businesses and other entities within the town. It might be, it might change from year to year, the focus. You know, you might have a real estate person 1 year, and so I think it would be good to have that latitude. Kids and parents, it's different, but I think the principal needs to be entrusted with, you know, business representation, community representation.
The Laura, you just mentioned a year period. The Newport policy has terms has 3-year staggered terms.
Oh, yeah, just like school committees.
Does that seem reasonable? Polly, you probably have a better sense of the community and their level of interest and engagement. Is 3 years too long for Little Compton?
It may be. I mean, especially if you get like a maybe a 7th or 8th grade parent that is really interested in being on it, and then their child graduates on. I mean, I wouldn't.
They're filled. I mean, it's not as though the position would go unfilled, and
Right.
would.
I don't know. I think 3 years sounds like a long attention span for a Little Compton person, but But I don't know if it would be off-putting. Like if someone was interested and they're like, oh, it's a 3-year term. I don't want to be married to that for 3 years. You know, I don't know.
Maybe 2 years?
Yeah,
But
'cause
also-
I don't think 1 year is long enough either. Like I think you're just getting into the meat of it after a year. So maybe we could try 3 and see how it goes.
But that would be for students and for parents, because the teacher team would essentially be whoever the instructional lead team is, and that's not
Right, that's
necessarily.
delineated. Right.
And a student, the students, if you're suggesting 7th or 8th grade, essentially couldn't do it for 3 years. So
Right. But if it was 2 years, they could be selected in 7th grade and follow through in 7th and 8th grade. That would have some kind of a nice continuity to it.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe you could have one of each, so that one's sort of like learning and the one is a veteran.
Right.
One 13-year-old and one 14-year-old.
Yeah,
Student voice is important, and
it's very important. Yeah.
and it's huge with SIT team, and you might even want to think about, if you think about the 4th graders, sort of the age of reason, 10, maybe having an upper elementary kid as well, 4th grade.
Sorry, I was looking for something else. Would you mind repeating that, please, Laurie? So I'm trying to make notes to take a stab at incorporating all these things for a future meeting, with the exception of the rubric. So I heard the upper elementary as far as student representative.
Yeah. I think so.
But
It doesn't have to just be 7th and 8th grade. You could have a little one on there, 10 years old or so.
okay, so we want upper elementary
And middle.
middle. Students, okay. I'm looking for procedures for, I read where there is a procedure where a member who is not participating or who misses X number of meetings can be removed.
Oh, gosh.
Now I'm trying to find where that is. Oh, no. If
It's right at the,
member misses 2 or more meetings, the principal has the right to replace the member. But that seems to be the only provision that there is for removing a member. And I don't know if we need any additional, or how do these things typically work, John?
Typically, to be honest with you, typically the way they work is you can't find anybody that's willing to do it, other than some very dedicated teachers
So
in
true.
some school districts told to be there by the union. And, you know, I think that having a mechanism, though, that the principal can say, I'm sorry, you haven't been coming to meetings,
Right.
without the principal having to go chase people for a resignation, is appropriate under the circumstances.
Do we need, so we should just be grateful for warm bodies and not looking for additional reasons to get them off? Is that what you're suggesting?
I'm saying that's correct.
Okay.
Well, no, I'm saying that if somebody stops showing up, then the principal should be able to replace the person.
Okay. Any other thoughts, Polly?
now,
Laurie?
No, we're good, but John is right. I've worked in buildings with SIT teams, and you're chasing down members, even huge buildings that start with 9, 10, 11. I've seen them go down to 4 or 5, sometimes 3. Oh, Sonia will need some latitude in replacing, but certainly not any process that's onerous.
Okay, I mean, it seems as though just compositionally we're looking at a team again, that is greater than 8.
Mhm.
If we're going to have 4 I like that the teachers are less than half of the representation.
Right.
I don't see that language in here. Perhaps, Mariah, you could get us the Charahoe draft again, not necessarily right now, or not right now, but for just to
She's
work.
actually already asked me. She's already on top of it. She's already
yeah.
asked me to get it.
Good.
So that is good. Sonia, any thoughts about the SIT team addition that we haven't discussed that you'd like to add?
I think we're good.
Okay. I am going to, I don't know if we want to put this on for Wednesday's policy meeting, but I'm happy to take a stab at incorporating, at kind of altering the Newport one and incorporating these changes for Wednesday, if that works for everyone.
I think so. It's a couple of tweaks.
Anything, Polly or anyone else?
No.
Okay. Mariah, could we please put this one on back, the school improvement team on for Wednesday's subcommittee meeting? And hopefully we can cross that one off then. And moving down, human capital management policy. Carolyn, thank you so much for the work that you did on this. I appreciate it. It is, I think, fantastic and addresses a number of issues that came up in the brief discussion that we had about it at the last subcommittee meeting. I have a couple of notes. I hope, Polly, have you had a chance to look through this one yet?
No, I have not.
Can we then go through and see what changes anyone might propose?
I mean, Carolyn did a great job reconciling, you know, the two policies. So yeah, I mean, everything that she's presented, and she's color coded it, and it's pretty straightforward. I think we have a really good first read.
I think it's very well done.
I think it is. I had a couple of questions that I had. One element that I wonder about is the provision for, in each instance where it is the superintendent, it reads the superintendent or designee. And I mean, I understand, John, that because it's not expressly prohibited by the General Assembly, it's allowed. But by the same token, I think that if the superintendent is charged with that authority, then that responsibility should fall with the superintendent, and the accountability falls with the superintendent. And what bothers me about the designee is that it allows a buffer zone potentially between the superintendent and accountability. And I would, my preference would be to strike designee every place where it appears, but I'm certainly happy to hear everyone else's thoughts on that.
And I think that the word designee that comes out of policies for districts where, like Pawtucket School Department, where there are 1,000 employees. And some of this work is not done by the superintendent, it's done by an assistant superintendent for human resources. So I get it that in a little district like Little Compton, the or designee is not necessary. The only reason I might consider doing it, and I'm not sure that this outweighs the concerns that Ed has raised, is, no offense, Lori gets sick, Lori is incapacitated, and you know, somebody has to make the call.
I absolutely agree. So it's not a word that is supposed to suggest, active delegation of that responsibility or that task. It's for extenuating circumstances. No superintendent is going to delegate anything unless he, she, or they are incapacitated.
I mean,
Well, no, I want to make it clear that in a big district like Pawtucket, they might delegate some of it. Hiring,
Right, it's assistant superintendent, and
right,
sometimes we
hiring
have layers.
custodians, the superintendent does not interview custodians.
Exactly.
But on the other hand, I will
With us.
say, I had a superintendent who had a brain tumor, and he was
Yeah.
not available to us
Mhm.
at all for about 2 weeks. And even after 2 weeks, he was on medical leave for 2.5 months.
Yeah, so leaving designee in there is a good idea.
perhaps in certain contexts, but I mean, certainly in terms of
We could
appointed
qualify it. Yeah, and
Could it,
yeah,
could it be, could it be a separate paragraph?
Sorry.
That's okay. So could it be a separate paragraph that, in the event that something should happen to our superintendent, a designee may be appointed to take over or, attend these.
I think that should be a separate policy, because it's not
Yeah.
just going to be for this, it would be for
Right.
anything. So if you wanted to, you could say, in the event of an emergency, the policy would be very simple. In the event of an emergency, the school committee may designate an interim or acting superintendent.
there should be a policy already in most districts that, is there one already on the books? There should be.
I don't know, but I think that is important. It's also important, frankly, in a district like Little Compton, because normally it's like, okay, it's going to be the assistant superintendent. And the answer to that is, you don't have one.
Right, and in some, it's okay, it's going to be the business manager, and he's part-time too, so,
Right.
or she or they, yes.
Yep. In a lot of districts, the next person on the list would be the business manager.
Exactly.
Would a policy like that cover us for if we remove designee from this policy?
You could get, and the answer to that is yes. So in other words, you could accomplish Ed's goal of removing designee from this policy, but at the same time, you would have a global policy, not just for personnel matters, but for anything.
Yeah.
In the event that Lori became incapacitated, that there would be,
Yeah.
just like there's a policy that if Donald Trump gets incapacitated, it's Pence, and if Pence is incapacitated as well, it goes to Nancy Pelosi.
Don't excite me, John.
But I think that would take care of it. So you could do what Ed
I
wants,
agree.
delete the word designee, but you could also somewhere else protect yourselves in the event that, God forbid, something happened to Lori.
Okay.
I do take chances during ski season.
Yeah. Wow. Let's get this.
I am not
Before
kidding.
the snow flies. Maybe, Mariah, we could add this to a future agenda, please. And if my understanding is correct, then there would be no objection to striking or designee every place where it appears in the policy.
Under those circumstances, I don't see what an objection would be.
Going down, the next note that I have is on page 2, the first full sentence that's remaining. Sorry, that's where my note is, up above the full sentence. The first full paragraph. So it begins, in furtherance of this policy, the superintendent shall submit.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have my, this, even though this may be the intention and may be understood, it's not specific enough. And my suggestion would be that where it reads from time to time,
Yeah.
that we amend it to make it clear that those template employment contracts are approved by the school committee prior to any appointment.
Oh, John, could you weigh in on that, Attorney
Yeah,
Anderson?
yeah, the answer to that is fine. If you wanted to add after the words for approval, if you wanted to add prior to any appointment, that's fine. On the other hand, that's fine.
Okay. And then
I mean, I use template contract. For example, I use template contracts in Foster Gloucester, in Charahoe, in Pawtucket. I use template contracts now in every district I do. And there's the template contracts cover everybody from, they would cover Carolyn, they would cover Lori, they would cover John McNamee, you know.
John Gabriel?
John Gabriel, they would, I think that's it.
That's about it.
It
The
would
district
cover
is
all of
here.
them.
I think
The
that
district.
it makes sense. I just don't, I think that because the superintendent would be in a position where he, she, or they are contractually obliging the school department for an extended period of time, that the contract that they would be
I like that.
entering into is one that the school committee expressly is aware of before the terms of the contract are entered into.
Yeah, that's fine. And that's why I'm saying,
Okay, thank you.
adding the language. I do want to then say that you need to put on a future agenda item as approval of template contracts, and I can get you samples from all of the communities that I just listed. I'm going to tell you right now, though, what's going to be the big rub. And the big rub is going to be, are the templates 3 years or 2 years?
Yeah.
Or are they fill in the blank with the superintendent? Pawtucket is fill in the blank with the superintendent because the superintendent uses it as a lever to tell people, you're doing a fabulous job, here's your 3-year contract, you're doing a crap job, and I'm really, thinking, you've got 1 year to either shape up or ship out. By contrast, in Charahoe, everyone is given a 2-year contract. The new superintendent was only given a 2-year contract because the policy there is everybody is 2 years. By contrast, in Foster Gloucester, everyone is given a 3-year contract. So you'll need to think about that.
It's all over the place.
Right, and there's different arguments for different arguments. Each one of those districts uses a different method, and each one of them will say why they like their method.
Right, you have to sort of balance employee commitment,
right,
and constantly cycling out and floating their resumes with a 2-year contract,
Yeah, and I will simply say I don't think that has been a huge problem in Charahoe because people like to be there. But on the other hand, that Lori has definitely made the argument as to what the problem is, which is why Foster Gloucester and Coventry are 3 years. And Pawtucket, it's a fill in the blank. And the superintendent, she gives 1s, 2s, and 3s.
I actually like the Pawtucket model myself.
Right. And it's a nice way of saying to somebody, you got a year to clean up your act or you need to go.
Right.
So you are suggesting, John, that we ought to have a separate policy for approval of template contracts?
You don't need a separate policy. You just need to approve the template policy, template contract, and you might as well vet it in the policy committee first.
Okay.
In other words, we need to give you.
You want HR to have template contracts on file?
Yeah, it's really going to be one template contract.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that is spelled out in this policy. But I think what Attorney Anderson means is an agenda item in the future.
Yes.
Yes. No, I took that to be the case. I didn't know that is fine. I am happy to take your recommendation about that. And is that something, Carolyn, that you would be able to work up? Is a sample template?
Oh, they're out there.
Yes, yes, I can work with John on that.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. The next sentence, if we are allowing that, the next sentence, my suggestion would be that where it reads such employment contracts as applicable, that we substitute approved for applicable to read such employment contracts as approved. So,
Approval. Well, in the previous sentence, it does say school committee from time to time for approval, such employment contracts as applicable shall be. I think that just reinforces the previous sentence. So it already says approval right there, the sentence before. So I
yep.
think applicable can stay. If they're approved, they're applicable. How's that?
Yes, I just want to make it clear that the two terms are synonymous, so that all that are applicable are approved, not necessarily that there are some that are applicable which are unapproved. So I mean, to my mind, it's less ambiguous to have it read approved than applicable, but if the intention is clear that it is only those templates that are approved, then I'm happy to leave it.
I mean, that's my interpretation, that one follows the other for that very reason. That's my interpretation. I'm not a lawyer. I only raised one.
How about if we compromise then, Laurie, and we just strike that parenthetical phrase altogether?
Shall be utilized. Yeah.
Such employment contracts shall be utilized.
Perfect.
Okay.
Because they're already approved.
There we go.
So I think we found some redundancy.
All right.
Excuse me, Ed. Excuse me,
Ed,
Yes.
Mariah's trying to speak.
The
Oh,
sentence
sorry.
right before, did you guys want to include any more words there, or?
No, we're good.
I think if we just can insert prior to appointments, I had on my hard copy at home, I had struck from time to time and inserted it there, but I'm more than happy to leave it, as John suggested, after approval. So to read from time to time for approval prior to any appointments.
Just put the N there in appointments that, yeah.
The next one that I had was down under, does anyone else have any others in this section?
No, it's good.
Okay. Under appointment of principal in the first paragraph, my question is where it reads, a screening committee appointed by the superintendent consisting of at least one parent, one staff member, one member of the SIT team who is not employed in the department, and an administrator will screen the applications and conduct candidate evaluations. So I'm guessing we've had the problem of making clear who administrators are. Was it your intention, Carolyn? And it would seem to my mind to make sense that the administrator really means the HR administrator. And if we mean the HR administrator, can we just say the HR administrator?
Yes.
Well, I think the administrator could also be the IT director or the business manager. So this.
But why would the IT director be interviewing prospective principal candidates? That's what I don't get about why it would.
Well, if you had a scenario whereby the
Yeah.
superintendent wanted to vet candidates and really drill into their knowledge of certain technologies, the IT director may be asked to guide some of the questioning and listen to the responses.
IT directors in many districts do sit on selection committees for building level principals because they're district level. And so they want to make sure that principals or assistant principals have, you know, high level instructional technology experience, or are at least early adopters and very comfortable with technology. So I think administrator is good. It's understood it will be Carolyn, but
It's not understood. That's my question.
Yeah.
Is I don't know how to interpret administrator. It would not occur to me that an IT person would be sitting in, but I will take your word that it may be beneficial to have an IT person sit in.
I think IT directors are different from techs that work in districts. So you could have one IT director in charge of 6 techs and a database manager. So an IT director in a big district is actually seen as part of the central administration. It's usually the superintendent, assistant superintendent, business manager, IT director, and HR person. That is central admin. And sometimes there's a federal grants person or whatever. But so we do have 4 central administration employees, and each one I think could serve quite well on a selection committee for principal.
Okay.
Suggestion?
Go for it.
Suggestion, maybe you want to consider allowing administrators to read as plural, so it will allow flexibility. If you just want the HR director, you can just have the HR director in, but if you want to have the HR and tech director, since administrators could read as plural, you can have multiple administrators on a particular screening committee for a particular, for this appointment of principal.
I think that works.
Okay, if we add that in the way this reads, though, that obliges multiple administrators for each committee. It doesn't allow it doesn't allow the discretion for 2. It commands more than 1.
Well, maybe we could put the S in parentheses or something
Right, that's
like
what
that.
I was thinking.
Yeah. Now, Jonathan, are you on this call?
Did you have to jump out?
No,
This
he's
one,
in.
yes, I am here. Sorry, my
Okay.
internet died before, but I'm back.
Okay.
So Jonathan, do you agree that tech directors, and I've seen them and I've sat on search committees with them, generally would be open to being on a selection committee for a building principal?
Yeah, definitely. And I've served on both improvement teams and selection committees for positions like that. I mean, it all depends on obviously what the focus is at the time, what we're trying to get out of it. But as we all know, especially given the current circumstances, technology and tech literacy is more important than ever. We definitely need to place somewhat of an emphasis on that to really prepare kids for the future.
Yes, a district would not want to hire a Luddite right now. That's for sure.
Yeah, I don't have any issue with it. It hadn't occurred to me. The one principal search committee that I was involved with didn't have the tech person as a member of it, so it didn't. I will take you at your word. I didn't know if it was something that we wanted to limit to HR, but I can understand why that might you would want to broaden that. Polly, did you have any thoughts?
No, I agree with John about maybe adding the S in parentheses because there might not be any need for another administrator, but we don't want to limit ourselves to that if it might be important.
Okay.
Right.
John, we had a discussion at the last meeting, and I don't know if this is an appropriate time to bring it up, but it's something to think about at any rate, or a question that I have, is that the way that 16-2-11(7) reads, so the powers of the superintendent, it reads, to appoint administrators and other personnel not assigned to individual schools, which I don't know how to interpret that, because there would be arguably one way to read this where HR and IT would actually be something that Sonia would have to propose to Laurie and not necessarily fall under Laurie's purview. because they're only assigned to the one department, the one school.
Well, it's the district, though. They're assigned to the district department, not the school.
I don't know how to interpret it, but that's a question that I had, John.
And the answer to your question is, in a school district like Pawtucket with 16 schools, the purpose of that provision is to empower the building principals to take responsibility for the hiring at the building level, whereas if the position is like an IT director or an ESL director or a special ed director, that is done at the district level.
There
Or
is-
HR.
Yeah, but an awful lot of this legislation is clearly tempered toward districts and not toward smaller departments. In many ways, Little Compton's department practice already achieves what this legislation is dictating.
Correct. And then what this is, let's be blunt, this is aimed at places like Providence.
Without question. And I'm not so, but, I think Smith Street had some problems if they're just borrowing language because they anticipate how it might affect departments rather than districts.
Right. Well, let me make it very clear. Providence is a school department, just like you are a school department. Legally, the Providence School Department is a part of the city, just like you are a part of the town of Little Compton. There are districts in Rhode Island. The districts, though, are the regional districts that cross town lines.
Right.
Sorry, I will qualify it and say one school departments.
Correct. And there are two others like you in the state, Block Island and Foster.
Right.
Moving down, my next question about the appointment of principal, unless there's anything else on, sorry, my next one is in the final paragraph of that section. In the second to the last sentence, any candidate who is a current resident of the town of Little Compton and meets the qualifications of a publicly advertised position shall be given consideration for such vacancy in the Little Compton School Department. Yet, it's then followed by such consideration does not entitle the candidate to an interview for a position. So what is the consideration that is given that we need to specify that candidates from Little Compton will be given consideration?
Yeah, I can give you the example. If you get 30 applicants for being principal of Little Compton and the committee decides to only interview 5, what it means is that you will look at the Little Compton application carefully, but if the Little Compton application is not one of the 5 best, then you will not interview the Little Compton resident.
Yeah, it's just courtesy.
Again, it's designed, it's not so much a big district versus small district, because in some of the big districts, nobody wants to be a principal at some schools. Whereas in Charahoe, they just had 23 people apply to be superintendent because it's an attractive district.
To my mind, that isn't really any more consideration than anyone from any other town or state would receive. And if we really need to give them consideration, why don't we guarantee
if you want to guarantee
qualified an interview?
If you want to do that, that's fine. From a legal perspective, I do not have an objection to that.
Polly, do you have any thoughts?
Polly, you need to unmute.
My
There you
family
go.
is being noisy. I don't think just because you're from our town should give you any kind of upper hand. We should be deciding whether we want to interview you and hire you based on your skills, your resume, everything else.
Okay. Pat, how about, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, so it's stipulated in Charahoe what, John?
What was it? I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
It's stipulated what way in Charahoe's
Which?
for the person that's in town that applies for principal?
Charahoe does not do that. In fact, I can tell you there was an in-town person who did not get an interview.
Should it even be in the policy?
That's that's up to this is not so much a legal issue, it's more of a policy/political issue.
It's usually a courtesy interview that someone gets, or a courtesy phone call, or something like that.
I would hope we would be equally courteous to all the applicants.
My thought would be to strike that from the policy.
Which, okay.
I'm happy to strike it. It just didn't seem to me, it seemed as though, it granted consideration, but on the same token, it wasn't any more consideration than any other qualified applicant got, or at least it wasn't specific. So I'm happy to strike it as well.
Right, it was basically it really says nothing.
Yes.
Mariah's got her hand up.
I'm
Yes.
just lost. I can't seem to find that sentence. I'd love to be able to strike it for you.
It is the second to the last sentence in the section Little Compton School Department Hiring Protocol. It begins, any candidate who is a current resident of the town. Keep going.
Yeah. Did you
Right,
pass that?
It's on page 2. I'm sorry. We're on page 2, the first complete section, which is Little Compton School Department Hiring Protocol.
Unfortunately, I don't have page numbers.
Okay, let me go and see if I can keep scrolling up. Up, another. Keep going up. You're a ways from it. It's toward the beginning. I'd never get
Oh,
through these
wait.
that quickly, Mariah.
Ah,
So
Here.
it is, yes,
It's
just
right
above appointment of principal, and all these boxes are blocking me. So the second to the last sentence in this paragraph, beginning any candidate, yes.
there it is.
So we just should strike the last 2 sentences.
I agree. I personally have never seen that in a policy.
Okay.
And the answer to that is, I have.
Yeah, and I know, but I mean, I've seen it as a practice.
Yeah, I have, to be fair, I haven't seen it as a policy. I've seen it as a practice that if you don't hire the local person, you don't get, the administration gets yelled at.
Mm. Right.
That's what I used to do when I was
No
on
one
the school
speaks to you
committee
in
as a
town?
project.
Okay. Moving back down into appointment of principal then. The next question that I have is with respect to, in the second paragraph, the phrase, well, let me see if I can, I can't even tell if this is a period, but I'm looking at a sentence which is, as an outcome of any interviews, the presiding administrator or HR director.
And it shouldn't, and the answer is, you can you can delete the presiding administrator or.
Yeah.
In Pawtucket, for example, in Pawtucket, they interviewed for something today and the presiding administrator happened to be an assistant superintendent.
Okay. So we just have, so it would read the HR director.
That is correct.
Okay.
Perfect.
Moving down more to the next paragraph, which is also a sentence. So I'm trying to understand the this repository. Any certified support staff member utilized as a member of the screening committee will be selected from a pool of volunteers maintained by the principal. Yet we're
that doesn't
hiring
make
the principal's position.
right.
Where is
and
that? Oh, that's wrong.
So
Right.
do we want the principal to have that list, or do we want HR or the superintendent, or how?
Yeah, I don't like that entire paragraph. I'm
Yeah.
not picking people to pick the principal out of a hat.
It was as far as the composition of the search committee membership.
From the two bargaining units, support
Yes.
staff and certified staff.
I understand that. I think that frankly, if they're certified or support staff picked, frankly, if it's a certified person, let Jean Dunn pick the person.
Right, and also Beth Turkar, or whoever the executive board is, president, whatever.
However they
I
want to
agree.
choose it, just give me a name, Jean, give me a name, Beth, and so forth. And so forth. That way they have some ownership in the process.
Right, that's how it's done in other districts. Superintendent contacts the executive board, asks for volunteers, and however they find them,
So,
Right.
that works. So I guess we could strike that definitely.
but if we're striking it, what provision do you want to have a certified person as part of the search committee, or do you want to eliminate them as part of the search committee?
Yes,
Well,
here is where we probably want to codify the practice that Lori spelled out.
Right.
What
Oh,
we
that's
each collective bargain, try this, striking the paragraph and simply saying each collective bargaining unit shall provide the name of one member to serve on the search committee.
Right. The name of one member and an alternate.
One member and an alternate.
That's how some districts, just in case.
The name one member and an alternate. Okay. The next sentence has the same issue that I had with the other one, in that it calls for the principal to be maintaining the parent pool list. Do we want to have a parent pool, and should we?
The superintendent will select the parents.
Right.
Okay. Select from a list of.
We'll select from volunteers.
Right.
Okay.
So superintendents usually send out an email to the community. We are conducting a search for the next principal, blah, 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 blah. We're looking for parents. Please contact the superintendent's assistant if you're interested, that sort of thing. We're good.
The sentence should be the superintendent or designee will select parent members from volunteers.
Okay.
And then Mariah, delete what was before. The parent member of the search committee shall be selected from a pool of parents.
First sentence.
Yeah.
That was all that I had. I have the neighbor's dog in my yard, so I'm going to have Sally, Lida, stop.
Did you guys want me to delete both of those first two sentences?
Yes.
Yeah, to qualify parent participants like that is just not fair.
Right. You also can't, frankly, get the village nut job. I'm not joking.
Exactly. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Any other anything else that anyone wants to add to that one? I don't. That sort of completes mine. Questions about reading this. With the only additional question that I have is going down to appointment of department administrators.
Right, me too. That obviously doesn't reflect Wilbur McMahon. We call them coach coordinators or members of the instructional leadership team. It is a stipended position, both of them.
Excuse me, Lori, that's intended.
I'm guessing that's HR and IT, is that right?
That's correct, Ed.
Thank you. Okay. And I read this earlier, and that I'm a little bit daft right now. Okay.
No
Also.
worries. I don't even know what time it is. I'm gonna try and stick to my 7 o'clock time
We
frame.
could clarify it by saying appointment of school department administrators.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do we need to further
Okay.
clarify it to HR and I to include HR and IT?
And business.
I tried to define that a little bit up top, Ed. I don't want to be jumping around this document. I'll
Right.
find it and get back to you.
Yeah, I mean, we have a limited number of school department administrators and John, do you think we should delineate or just leave it
No, I
open-ended
would
like
prefer
this?
not to delineate because
Yeah,
frankly, hopefully this policy is going to outlast all of us. And
Exactly.
30 years ago, I doubt there was the technology director in Little Compton. 30 years from now, maybe there'll be the distance learning director.
Right. So,
Ed, just to clarify, under the section up top called authorization, the second paragraph reads, pursuant to Rhode Island General Law, blah, the superintendent or designee shall directly appoint department administrators, including the information technology and human resource directors
perfect. Yeah.
at levels of compensation in accordance with the Little Compton compensation policy. I did not list the business administrator there, the business manager. However, that can be added.
I mean, John was hired, it predates me, and I know it belongs to the town. He's sort of a shared service, actually. I think we need Attorney Anderson to look at that and maybe leave some wiggle room in there for other positions.
That's fine.
Carol, could you please direct me to that paragraph? I'm not seeing it.
Yep, if you go back up to authorization, I believe it's probably your first page.
Yes.
So the second pursuant.
Yes. Thank you. Is there a reason why we need to have directly appoint rather than just appoint? Isn't appoint the same as directly appoint? I don't know. Doesn't really matter substantively, I guess. Is there anything else on the human capital management system?
Ed, I have just a few notes just to
Yeah,
clarify a few kind of process-related items, if that's okay.
Sure.
Mariah, if you scroll down to, you see like there's a little sticky symbol. All right, if you click on that, hopefully, I don't remember, okay.
There it is, yep.
Okay, so on the background check, within this policy, if we could specify whether a background report is required just to apply, or if someone who's applied could sign a waiver for a BCI and then enter the process. So in other words, should an applicant even be screened by the committee prior to having a background report on file? So how do you, right now, it's part of the process. We will let someone come in and interview while it's being processed, as long as they come in and sign the paper.
Right.
I do ask that if they have one already to please supply it at their first interview, if not sooner.
I think that the current practice is the appropriate way to do it because you don't want somebody who could be a fabulous, human resources director disqualified because the police department in the town they live in is working slow as molasses.
Mm-hmm.
Getting things approved, getting background checks in some communities is much more of a burden than it is in Little Compton, where everybody knows the police chief.
Okay, so what I'll do, if Ed and Polly are in agreement with that, I'll go through and make sure that this policy it doesn't contradict what John just said.
Sure. I mean, I don't, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, Carolyn knows how I feel about BCI checks. I don't like anyone coming in the door for an interview without one, but.
I mean, the way this reads is a criminal background check. It doesn't say a satisfactory criminal background check. It means you just have to.
Right, and then the reason why it doesn't say satisfactory is because, for example, it depends on how you define satisfactory. And that, under the BCI law, is up to the superintendent. And I'll give you a very specific example. We had a teacher in Pawtucket who every weekend got arrested outside of an abortion clinic. And she got arrested on a weekly basis. She never once brought her personal views about abortion to school. Teachers would not, people would not know it at all. The decision was made to hire her. There's also a superintendent in the state of Rhode Island who, as a very young man in his 2021, used to collect the rent and was arrested one time for perhaps being overly enthusiastic when he was collecting the rent. He's now in his 50s. And, he's been the superintendent in a district here in Rhode Island and in Massachusetts. And I'm not sure that, you would want to necessarily disqualify him. The decision of whether a BCI is satisfactory is committed to the superintendent for that reason.
Is it committed to the superintendent in Rhode Island general laws, or is this school policy?
It's committed to, I'm not sure. I am not sure whether it's policy or in the law. I know that's how it works, though, in every district.
I did not, I don't even know. Polly, do you know what our policy is on background checks?
I do not.
I don't even know. I mean, I wouldn't know whether or not we have any language that allows for the superintendent's discretion in any way. I don't know what we do. Maybe that's something that someone needs to look at.
We can pull Sean can pull the BCI statute, and we'll get back to you with an answer. But I'm really going to stress that there needs to be some discretion here. If somebody is arrested for peacefully protesting police brutality tonight, and it's the most peaceful way, but they sit down on the State House steps and they don't move, and so forth, I'm not sure. I think the superintendent should have the discretion to say whether that's a disqualifying, a disqualifying factor.
I personally don't disagree, John, but by the same token, I'm hearing you say this, and I've never encountered that language, and I'd just be curious to know what Little Compton or the state of Rhode Island allows for discretion. It's a matter of curiosity, and if we don't have any language, if it does fall with the school committee, if we don't have any language, then we ought to.
It does not fall with the school committee, but what we'll do is we will pull the statute and get you an answer.
Thank you.
It's the same thing with parent volunteers. You could have, I've done BCI night. I've done BCI nights for parents, and sometimes you do find that someone had a marijuana bust in college, and now they're 45, and
I have had it. Lori reminds me that I've had it several times in one of my districts. When the parent signs up to do the field trip, and the superintendent has to make the call. So, for example, if it's a DUI within the last year, I've had superintendents say, no, you're not participating. On the other hand, if it's, like Lori said, somebody had a joint 20 years ago, that's a different situation.
And I've encountered that as a principal, and in concert with the superintendent, you use your discernment. You have to have some wiggle room there.
And
not on felonies, of course. But,
Lori has never called me about it, but other superintendents certainly have.
Yeah, I haven't encountered it in Little Compton, but I have encountered it in my past life. Yeah.
Carolyn, did you have additional items?
Yes. Mariah, if you could move to the next note, please. Okay, so this policy had 2 levels of screening. The first level being the one that, as the HR director, or if it's a teacher, Sonia would assist me with, or Lori, whereby as applications come in, we do a level 1 screening. And the template for that, the sample template for that, is attached to this policy. And what that does is it allows us to go through and make sure that all of the basic requirements are there, such as, you know, an active certification, the career specifications. And what I just want to clarify is whether that level 1 screening would still be done within the office of the superintendent and HR and or principal, depending on, you know, if we're hiring a teacher versus an administrator. And then the screening committee, as defined by the new language in the policy, would step in at level 2, which,
yeah, I agree with that.
I do too.
okay. All right, so I don't know if there needs to be language inserted in here, and I can go back through after Mariah has accepted and rejected all of the comments made today. For our next read on this policy, I'm happy to go through and add language that says, as applications come in, the level 1 screening will take place. Then this screening committee will come in at level 2.
Well,
I
it's
agree
called
with that.
paper screening. Yeah, it's called paper screening.
Yeah.
That's one level, and then the next level, because without an active cert or reciprocity, you need to spell that out too.
Right.
Sometimes that takes a bit. It depends on both departments of education. So,
Well, and data is kept by the HR office as to how many applications were received, how many applications were qualified, and how many will be interviewed and why. So we can still maintain that data and pass it along to the screening committee, the level 2 screening committee. Okay. So that answers that one. Mariah, I think I had a couple more maybe related to this as we go down to those forms. And I think it's just providing clarification on those forms. Oh, here we are. We answered that one, the national BCI. The next one is, what are the Department of Health and RIDE requirements in terms of health screenings? So that's just something that maybe with Sean's help I can do some digging on. And scrolling.
I've only known about the tuberculosis.
So then the appendices contain the sample screening forms. So here is where I put that if the school committee wants that level 1 screening, and it seems that they do, then consider adding words to this so that this is to be used as a template. It can be modified to fit the requirements of a particular position. So if we want to put in that we're looking for a very specific degree or a very specific cert, we can write that in, check it off. I would also maybe want to look at the fact that we don't do a lot of this on paper anymore. The platform that we use is SchoolSpring. And within SchoolSpring, we have the ability to set different levels of screening. And you can even specify exactly which component of the application you want screened. So for example, the level 1 screening that I would do with Lori and or Sonia, I would say, every application go into this screening pool and then look for the following requirements. And we can each go in and check. And then the ones who filter through to the next level of screening, the same thing can happen. So it may be that the record keeping and the data analysis is done not necessarily on a bunch of pieces of paper, and the data is captured within now this electronic format. So I didn't know, again, if this needed to be acknowledged within the policy that is providing the sample template and it's got to be signed off, or can we capture the data electronically that serves the same purpose?
I'm
Whichever is
guessing that
easy.
question's for you, John.
Yeah, my response is whichever is easier and more practical for you.
Yes, well, I mean, right now, for example, to use a very simple example, we had a posting for summer school teachers, and Sonia and I went through, we're both in the initial evaluation round.
Yeah.
Not a good example because it's an internal posting and we know everyone has their certifications and,
Right.
everyone's qualified. However, if Sonia were to say we need to go external with this, then we would be going through and looking for
And that's perfect. I think that's perfectly appropriate.
Yeah, within that electronic format. So I don't want the policy to mislead the school committee in any way into thinking that we're passing around these templates and pieces of paper when we're actually employing the functionality of an electronic program, which accomplishes the same.
Right, and that's perfectly fine.
Okay. Do we need to, excuse me, add any wordings in the policy so that, a school committee member who comes on maybe and is reading this for the first time understands that, the school committee allows for the use of electronic?
No, I don't think so. I don't think we need to go to that level of granularity. I mean,
Okay.
we don't have a policy that says that school committee members can use laptops and that they can use Zoom and we use, and like that. No, I don't think we need to do it, because here's my problem. Technology changes over time. And we may think that School Spring is like super cool and popular, like MySpace. And in 5 years, it'll
Right.
be like, I'm not on MySpace.
Well, I know that we don't want to mention any one tool or
No,
platform specifically.
but that type of, but I'm saying that type of technology.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to get tied in a policy to a particular technology, or, I just think keep it in general terms.
Right. And I also don't want the policy to tie the school committee to maintaining records in a certain way that just isn't practical in this day and
No, I
age.
agree.
Okay.
And John, I'll add to that Betamax.
Yeah, Betamax is another one. Y'all have your Betamax at home?
My parents bought one. Okay, we're moving along.
I think that might be all of my comments.
Excellent.
Do we have Polly? Any other observations, comments, questions?
Nope, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Could we please put this on for first read, Mariah, and then perhaps Carolyn, at least for the regular meeting, you could have the additional language so we can amend it at the regular meeting?
Sure. And what I'll do is once Mariah accepts all of the changes made tonight, I'll go in and you'll see it just as it is now with the red and green, so you can see what's been added for the first read.
Great. Thank you
Okay.
so much. Moving down, we can take a stab. I don't know how to print out a hard copy, and being a Luddite, it's the only, I have to do edits with a pen, I think. But so moving down to 3.6, we have a remaining 11 minutes, and maybe we could take a where are we?
3.8, do you mean 3.8?
Sorry, 3.8.
Yes.
And see how this plays. I don't know. It was 9 o'clock last night when I was trying to come up with something just to work with, and I've got to find another copy here. I don't know if anyone else had a chance to read through it. But just to get the ball rolling, I threw it out there, and let me see if I can find mine here. So yes, thank you. Somebody called the first one, which is has. Did everyone have a chance to look over this? I don't in any way think that it is it can't possibly be the final word on this. So any thoughts about objections?
Bringing it up.
Are we on the compensation one?
We are on, it reads as administrative compensation policy, but we agreed at the last meeting that it really was specific to the principal. So the title would be principal compensation policy.
Yeah, so I read this, and I'm looking to put a range in there for the compensation.
I'm happy to put in a range. So that would be under policy 1, I take it. A base salary schedule should be replaced with a base salary range. Is that?
John, what are you seeing for elementary, middle school principals across the state? What's the range we should be in?
I would say that the range, well, you asked two different questions there, the range that you should be in or the range that other schools are in. The range that I see is basically probably between 95 and 110.
Yeah.
But I also will say that you have certain expectations of your principal that other school districts do not put on principals.
Yeah. So.
I also, by the way, you asked me the range on elementary. The range on middle school is a little bit higher.
Yeah. So I think Sonia's at what, $119? Is that right? HR, wake up. Get off mute. Stop leaning back in your chair.
Sonia has one of the longest work years out of probably the entire principal cohort in the state of Rhode Island. She is contractually obligated to put in 235 days. When John will agree with this.
That is the longest. That is the longest.
By far the longest.
I'm not looking to talk about Sonia's pay and what she does. I'm looking for the next person that we're going to get at a bargain real cheap. I'm not talking about. I'm looking in the future. That's why I want to put that in there. Because Sonia has decided that she's going to go down her retirement. We want to get a bargain basement, and who knows who will be here. But I want to give them the flexibility to say, we don't need to go off that last, principal's pay, scale. Maybe we want somebody with less experience, maybe we want to do this or that or whatever, that fits Little Compton. So I would like to have the pay scale lower. I think that's going to benefit moving forward after this principal. Does that make any sense?
I think the best practice is to use the current principal always, that salary as somewhere in the range to attract.
Lori, I'm going to respectfully not necessarily, I get your argument, but I will tell you, for example, that the new superintendent in Charahoe is making almost 10% less than her predecessor. And the school committee set a range at the beginning of the search. They set a range of between 150 and 160. The incumbent superintendent, who had been there forever, was making 172, and the salary landed at 156.
But isn't there language in a lot of the policies that reference current compensation as some sort of, not a baseline, but some sort of inflection point in the process? Am I wrong? Did I read that?
And I can't, I am not familiar. I'm not saying that it's not out there, but I'm not familiar with that. And I can simply say that,
I read
the
it.
experience that I just had replacing, the superintendent of the year with somebody who had been with the district for 15 years as a superintendent and 4 years prior to that as the assistant superintendent is very, they got somebody who's the superintendent who has never worked in a central administration. And that's what they wanted to do. But on the other hand, they are paying accordingly, which is substantially less.
I think you did read. I think I remember reading that too, Lori, in the statute.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, we did read it.
I think I remember reading it, but I think for our little town here, I mean, we almost hired someone that had no principal experience, but we didn't. So who knows, what's going to come down the pike, in the future. So my vote would be, to have a range and have it in the lower. But what do you think, John? What do you think the range would be? I think you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah, no, I know where you're going, and I think that the range right now would be between 95 and 110. And I would encourage you to consider indexing it for inflation.
All right, so 95 to 110 index for inflation. And now where does that go? Does that go in the budget or does it go in the policy?
No, the range goes in the policy. You separately set a number in the budget as to how much money you're going to put aside for that. And it's my advice to the committees that I have, and this came up recently in one of my committees, where they wanted to go above the range by $7,000 or $8,000 to get a business administrator. And I told the superintendent that she would have to go back to the school committee and get permission to move the money to do that. On the other hand, if that person had come in at 120, it's totally her pick. And it was her pick even at 128. The issue was, though, she didn't have the money in her pocketbook to pay 128. She had to ask the school committee for more money.
Does that language have to be in this policy too?
I think that what the policy that you need, frankly, and I have no idea whether we have it or not, is that I have several districts that have what are known as budget transfer policies that make it very clear that the superintendent and the business administrator can't just get together and move money around to do what they want. That if they move money out of the account that is as approved by the school committee, they have to go back to the school committee. And indeed, I can tell you in Pawtucket, for example, every month it's a standing agenda item, and the list gets bigger at the end of the year when, for example, I'm sure that the business administrator probably moved money out of snow plowing this year and moved it to PPE supplies and so forth. But she had to go to the school committee to do it. She just couldn't pull out the school department checkbook and do it. She had to go to the school.
Where would that fall in this policy?
It wouldn't go in this policy. It would go in a general budget policy because, again, if she has to move the money from snow plowing, the school committee may say, no, you can't move it to PPE. You need to move it to textbooks, or you need to move it to technology or fixing the roof, or a summer party for the school committee. That should go in front of the school committee to be decided. You set the budget. The one power that the two powers, I'll take it back, 3 powers the school committee has after ed reform. 1, you pick the superintendent. 2, you set the budget. 3, you write policy. Beyond that, you are pretty much out of the business that you were in as of last year. So with regard to the budget, however, using your budget power and your policy power, you need to set limits in your budget, but you do need to have a mechanism so that the superintendent can say, I got money left over in snowplow and doing nothing, and I desperately need to buy, face shields for the people passing out lunches. There's got to be, it's not, and this is, and let me make it very clear. This is not directed at Lori or John McNamee or Carolyn or Sonia. This is the advice I give in every school committee across the state on this issue. And it just came up, it's a matter of public record in Charahoe. They wanted to go $8,000 over the limit to bring in a business administrator. And while the superintendent was able to pick the man she wanted, she had to get the money out of the school committee because her budget was not big enough.
All right, so I think those are good suggestions. We should incorporate that, Ed and Polly.
I'm happy to. So it sounds as though we need to add an additional general budget policy.
Yes, that's correct. That is correct. And when you have that policy discussion, John McNamee should be part of the discussion. I know that Pawtucket has a budget transfer policy.
I'd be surprised if Little Compton didn't. There's always been internal transfer practices. You know, if a building principal wants to shift from, let's say, supplies to contracted services for new subscription for something online. In other districts, they always had to, you know, complete a request, a transfer request, and it would go through the channels, end up at the business manager and then the superintendent.
In Pawtucket, they go to the school committee. In Coventry, they go to the school committee unless they're like $5,000 or less. Coventry has a dollar now amount.
Yes.
Pawtucket has, I believe, no dollar amount. And there is a member of the school committee who would, you know, throw his body across the rostrum if they ever tried to put a dollar amount on it.
I mean, well, state procurement laws are what, 5,000 or more, so maybe that's a good sort of.
I believe that's what Coventry does.
Yeah, that works. Otherwise, you could just, it could be a red tape nightmare.
I think what you should do is simply put that on the agenda for a future policy meeting, and the places to look are Coventry and Pawtucket.
Do you have that, Mariah?
I think we should also put that on the agenda for the 10th so we can get the full committee and talk about that one.
Okay. In terms of adding the salary range to this policy, the proposal that I have under policy 1 was strictly a way just to try and address the language that was in the East Providence one, which provided for annual. It read, authorized to set and amend administrators' compensation on an annual basis.
Hey, excuse me, folks. I have got to jump to another school committee meeting, but Sean is on the call.
Can I ask,
Thanks, Don.
thank you very much, Sean. Can I ask those who are still with us whether or not we want to continue or to adjourn? 7 o'clock was my rough time limit in terms of switching over and putting on my chef hat for kids. But if you want to go for another half an hour, I can do that too.
No, I don't mind leaving. I'd like to get that range in there, though, 95 to 110 for discussion.
So
for the full
my
committee.
suggestion is, Mariah, if we could put this on for the 10th as well, I will take a stab at altering that so that it doesn't, something like, you know, the base salary is hereby set, the base salary range is hereby set between $95,000 and $110,000, something like that. I mean, I think it's an easy fix, but it also, there may be sections beyond that people also want to adjust. I can certainly adjust this language in the meantime.
I think 95 to 115, but that's just what's out there.
Okay. I don't, I understand your position, Pat, and I think it is, I think it is important. I also, certainly seems to be the intention for the General Assembly that salaries only ever go up in the legislation that they provided. But I think that it is important. I understand your position, and I think that that's an easy fix. And so, you know, after that, the language can be deleted. But if everyone would like, we can return to this one on the 10th, and hopefully the rest of it is fairly quick and easy, and we can cross some others off to put on for first reads for the regular meeting on the 10th.
So this one will be a first read, Ed?
That would be my hope. I would hope
Yeah.
that beyond the addition of changing that language to reflect the salary range with the specific salary range,
Yeah.
that the rest of it is acceptable, and we can have this on for a first read, and maybe a couple of the other ones that we still have hanging over us.
Sounds good. We'll get the whole committee to weigh in on it and see what they want to do.
Okay, sounds really good to me.
I'm gonna leave. Are we done?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All right. With that, I
Look
will.
at you. Look at you.
We are adjourned at 7:05.
All right.
All right, you guys have a good night.
Thank you very much.
Good night.
Night. Oh, how do I do this?